Salam, good evening, and welcome to the Iran-Israel War Academic Info Session, sponsored and organized by the Department of History at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. My name is Mateo Farzaneh, and I'm your host and one of the panelists tonight for what will hopefully be an informative session with some room for a civilized conversation about a very sensitive topic that basically involves 90 million people in Iran and several million, 5 million people in Israel, and everybody that basically lies in between those countries. This is how things will unroll tonight. Tonight's event is made of two parts. After this introduction, and in part one, I will introduce each panelist, and they will have 5 minutes to provide us with as broad or as narrow of their perspective based on their research, academic research in and about Iran, and hopefully they can relate it to the current situation. The panelists will then engage in a 30-minute conversation where they'll have a chance to ask each other questions or make comments about what's been said. In part two, our panelists will take questions from the audience with a set framework. It's important to note that this is a hate-free space. Hence, I reserve the right to disconnect anyone who interrupts, assaults, or our speakers, or disrupts. I don't think there is a way to do that on a webinar, but just in case we get hacked or something. To pay proper respect to victims and their families on both sides of the conflict, I would appreciate it if we refrain from insensitive comments. Showing emotion in a dignified way is not the same as being hateful. Without further ado, let's get started. Please help me welcome in alphabetical order our tonight's panelists. Abbas Amanat, who might be joining us, is Professor Emeritus of Yale University in Iranian Studies. Turaj Daryai is Professor of History at the University of California, Irvine, where he is also the director of the Samuel Jordan Center for Persian Studies and the editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia Iranica. My name is Mateo Farzaneh. As I said earlier, I'm a professor of history and the chair of the history department at Northeastern Illinois University. I'm also the chair of the political science department. I'm also managing editor of the Encyclopedia Iranica. Dariush Mohammadpour is an associate professor in the Department of Academic Research at the Institute of Ismaili Studies in London. Thanks for joining us, Dariush. I know it's 2 o'clock over there. This means a lot. And a lecturer for the Department of Education. He is also the editor of the Ismaili Heritage Series. Nahid Siamdoust is a cultural anthropologist at the University of Texas in Austin. Lior Sternfeld is an associate professor of history and Jewish studies at Penn State University. All of our panelists are distinguished, accomplished individuals. I didn't want to go into the detail of their publications. You can do that probably on your own. Welcome to all the panelists and all the guests. Dr. Daryai, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mateo. Hello to my colleagues and everyone who has joined us virtually. For me, of course, it's especially difficult time, like many others, as I just talked to Lior, where we have families in the Middle East. And the war obviously really affects us, and I'm sure many others. What I would like to just say briefly in the couple of minutes I have is not about things that I really shouldn't or do not know or shouldn't get into in terms of politics of the Iran-Israeli conflict, relations, and whatnot, but rather I think an aspect that may be overlooked in these discussions, and that is the cultural heritage of these countries which are in danger. I know, again, Israel as a country has many sites as well. It is, of course, the biblical site. So I am not sure what is going on there, but I assume it's almost similar to what may be going on in Iran, which I do know. There's an estimate of between 2 to 300,000 historical sites, monuments, archaeological sites in Iran. So this is a huge number. Of course, the country is huge, so it's clear that you would get so much. But many of these sites are not archaeological per se. So we're talking about mosques, palaces, things as such that are in the middle of cities. And those are the ones that are actually much more in danger than the spread out archaeological sites. And of course, when we talk about cities and historical sites, museums are of utmost importance. I know for a fact that the National Museum of Iran, in fear of something that may happen similar to what happened in Iraq in Baghdad to the museum, have already moved all the precious, as I mean, there's lots more, but the most precious ones into the vault, and the vault is three keyed. That is, not one person has the same key to the three actually locks, just to make sure that if there is looting and if there is chaos, things would not be lost. But however, we know that already some cities that have historical monuments, such as Kermanshah, which it was hit, and it was relatively closely hit to Taghabustan, the important Sasanian site, which is a site of visitation that terrified some of the people in the historical cultural uh, 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 milieu of what may be happening. But also, some of the nuclear sites are relatively close to dams and other places. Parchin, Natanz. I myself have been to Natanz. There's a Sasanian actually castle right across it. But for Parchin and other places, you have a dam that is built that if it's sort of destroyed, it's going to actually take over the cities like Ray and Baramin. Ray has been hit, and Ray has much older historical sites like Cheshme Ali and so on from prehistoric through the Qajar that are in danger of being destroyed as you might say collateral damage perhaps. And of course, this is beside family, of course, countries and people is very much on my mind of destroying these monuments and not being able to have them restored again.
Thank you, Turaj.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if people have questions or they would like to make comments, they're welcome to do that in the chat box or the Q&A. I guess the next person is me based on alphabetical order, so I'll go ahead and get started. Wars change lives forever. If anyone has been in it, they know it will never leave you. At the happiest moments of life, during the quietest walks with loved ones, during the busiest days at work, it appears out of nowhere, just like Gabriel did. The long arms of war reaches your body, and its steel fingers, one by one, wrap around your neck and begin to put pressure against the soft skin of your neck, moving your entire body towards a sound that is a faint voice you barely recognize telling you that you cannot and you must not forget what happened so many years ago when you were just about to reach puberty while walking with friends to school on a sunny, hot day of the first year of the academic year and heard the loudest sounds of an explosion that still you hear in the middle of Chopin's nocturnal bed or in the middle of the night thousands of miles away. It's as if Gabriel appears before you and instead of instructing you to recite, he demands that you remember and not forget. As a participant in the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, and now as a historian of that era. I'm dumbfounded. I become speechless whenever I hear about wars anywhere, regardless. On one side, the trauma, and the other, the political reasons for waging wars, is almost baffling, beyond comprehension, because one understands how wishful thinking and very warped way of analyzing reality in the minds of men, almost entirely men, I stress, translates into deadly weapons being dropped on the top of innocent women, children, and the sick. That's what history teaches us about wars, and I haven't read about one that acts as an exception. The leaders who decide on wars are war criminals, but I'm not expecting any of them to be tried in a court of justice, as that has been mocked by mostly Western leadership. Aside from leaders, are there enablers? Those who think they know without studying what it is they're trying to destroy in order to make better for others. In this case, Israel may win the battle, but it will lose the war. The Jewish state has a serious problem that seems unable to resolve, and that is its inherent conflict with the Palestinians. Because it cannot solve the problem, it attacks near and far neighbors. It terrorizes communities in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and now my beloved Iran. Anyone who knows anything about the way Israel remains alive knows, without American assistance, we could be meeting here tonight under totally different circumstances, but we're not. Okay, our next panelist is Dariush Mohammadpour. Dr. Mohammadpour, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matthew. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're on. Here is very early in the morning. So I'd like to give a very broad perspective of how the situation is unfolding in Iran, to give you some insights from the observations I've had on the rapidly evolving situation we have in Iran. And that has got to do with the social, political culture of what is happening right now in the contemporary society in Iran, which is really at the heart of the debates on how the international community, how the scholarly community looks at the Iranian people and the Iranian society, in the sense of how this generation has fundamentally changed. So we have what is purportedly an illegal, unprovoked attack of one state in the Middle East against another one. And that is something that I'm using an article of the United Nations Charter with a very clear definition of what is the meaning of unprovoked and what is the meaning of attack here. It's pretty straightforward. What we mean by unprovoked is that if somebody provokes you, you need to provide some kind of hard evidence that this is an actual imminent threat to you, rather than something that you speculate, rather than something that you want to really use as an excuse to call that a pretext for that kind of preemptive attack, so to speak. And we know that there are serious problems with it. So I'll just get back to how similar situations have evolved over the past 2 decades. So I'm specifically referring back to the beginning of the 20th to 21st century. So we've had the case of Afghanistan, we've had the case of Iraq, we've had the case of Syria, and of course, during the Arab Spring, we've had the case of Libya. So almost all of them, when we look at the so-called international community or the world powers, the way that they've engaged with it, trying to at least show a degree of commitment to international law, degree of respect for international law, that they don't appear as absolutely and totally blatant, arbitrary disregard of any kind of international norm. They actually took these things to the United Nations, to the Security Council, and we know that the invasion of Iraq was based on a lie. But even that lie, some people did actually make an effort to cook it, to produce it, to invent that lie. And it really went there. And it just didn't work in the case of Iran, because with all of these things, finally we had Colin Powell going to the UN Security Council, showing that vial that this is what is happening in Iraq, and of course everybody knew that that whole thing is a lie. This did not happen in the case of Iran, because right then there was already a serious negotiation, a series of negotiations going on between Iran and the United States, and of course everybody knows that Israel was torpedoing the whole process. So this is what is going to happen. Israel appearing as a liberator, Israel appearing as defending itself. In both cases, what is going to be the end result of this encounter, this conflict, whatever you call it, this revenge, retaliation, I don't know, saying that, oh, you've been threatening us for 40, 50 years, but that stupid idea of eliminating Israel off the face of the earth, which everybody knows is a ridiculous rhetoric. But the key point is this: how do you really do it? You cannot just go and raise a country like Iran, because this is no longer Gaza. This is not your backyard, so that you go and entirely eliminate a whole population in a very genocidal way, in the sense that, again, I'm referring back to the definitions of the UN and Geneva Conventions. So the options that would remain here is that you either turn Iran into another Syria, or into another Lebanon, or into another Libya. I mean, these are broadly the three options that you have. Go Syria, you remove Assad, and then you bring somebody from the outside, you install somebody who's going to listen to you, who doesn't have any kind of opposition against you. You send the Israelis to bring everything down, you bombard their airports, their arms, etc. And then, of course, you've got a tame ruler there who is going to listen to everybody. The other case is the case of Lebanon, that you don't destroy, you don't replace anybody new. You work with the current system, but you take out the contending powers. And in this case, you've taken out the Hezbollah. What is remaining there is the army and the rest of the other contenders. So they would have to deal with their own problem. So you leave them, let them deal with the issues that they've got. And of course, they've been grappling with this problem for a long time. The worst case scenario is the case of Libya, that you go there, that you remove the despot, that you kill the dictator, you take Gaddafi out, and then you leave the country to civil war, and it becomes a massive hotbed of nurturing and nourishing violence, which is spreading all over the Middle East and in other countries. And of course, the so-called liberator no longer cares about what's going to happen. So it came out of the Arab Spring, and these are really important points, because it turned things into nasty ways of looking at it. So what we see today is that at the end of this encounter, this attack, this invasion, this liberation, whatever name you want to give to it, you cannot just bring a new culture, a new administrative bureaucracy to replace the existing. It has to come from within. It has to emerge from within, out of the current culture of the people who live there, and based on their own needs, not dictated by somebody from the outside. You cannot export it. You cannot bring it from outside, because people do not really openly welcome and embrace that kind of an imposition. And we've seen it, that for the past 6 days, the main line of argument in the entire propaganda was that we are going there, and we are just giving our air support, we're giving our fire support, and allow people to come to the streets and rescue and have a protest against the regime. Well, this has not happened. It's been 6 days, and literally nobody listened to them. So people are fleeing their homes, but they're going to the north of Iran. They're going to mountains. They're going to villages to stay away from the bombing. So they do not see you as liberators chanting right next to your Humvee, saying, "Okay, thank you for coming and saving us." So that did not really materialize. So I tried to wrap it up here very quickly. What we have here is that we cannot have something like the Taliban, that after 20 years of investment, then you hand it over and you bring it back to the very point that you started. And this was deeply political, and there was no vested interest in the future of the people, in the improvement of the quality of life of the people. It was just a reaction. And of course, they left, and that's what the United States did with it. So Israel is going to do what? Is going to go to Iran, like George Bush, taking Halliburton with it, and putting Paul Bremer there, and then after dismantling the Iraqi army, turning the whole country into the hotbed of ISIS, which again was another disaster. So are you going to turn it like the beginning of the Iranian Revolution and start putting people to death, executions, and then going back all to the very same position? So the key point is something very, very simple. This should be an inborn. This should be something which comes from within. And in this country, you cannot just have an army, import and install a figure outside Iran, and say that, okay, in this country, we are going to bring somebody from an archaic, patriarchal, male-dominated system in a country which has just gone through the woman life freedom movement, which is not going to say yes to just a male figure who doesn't give a damn about women, and in their language, in their rhetoric, it's deeply misogynist, and said, okay, this is deeply rooted in your culture, so come here and accept it. So that is a huge problem, because there is a mismatch in the way that certain people are actually looking at the current expectation, even though there is a great deal of frustration in people inside Iran and the diaspora, that they look at the current system, that despotic regime that they're not happy with. But one thing that they missed is that it seems that so far the Iranian people have not given in to that kind of imposition. And it seems to have, at least at the face of it, failed to really get the people on board with that kind of approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoudpour. You took Dr. Amanat's time too, so which is fine.
Has he come back?
All right. Next is Dr. Siamdus.
Hi, everyone. I first want to express my, I guess, solidarity and sympathy with everybody here. I know a majority of us are going through very difficult times, experiencing, this war that's affecting our people and our country. I guess, I will comment on the media coverage as a media scholar. I appreciate all the comments my co-panelists have made. On the one hand, I want to comment on the way the Western media has been covering this. I think we've all been paying attention to the ways in which Western media at first very much went with the sort of the script that they're used to, which is Iran is, of course, the enemy and we support Israel, and we just buy all the talking points of the Israeli government of this being a preemptive war. As usual, I do come from a media background. I used to be a journalist, but really many of them failing in their capacities and responsibilities to condemn this as an illegal act of war, to do the homework, to really use the correct terminology, to name the thing as it is, and just really taking the Israeli script. But the interesting sort of development that I've observed is that because of the MAGA movement in the US, there has been sort of a slow grind and pushback against this notion of going to war for Israel. And so that has actually seeped into the media narrative in the West. And so now we're seeing people like Tucker Carlson, becoming, unfortunately, finding a lot of strange bedfellows like, Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones of the InfoWars project. We're finding a lot of bad people who are coming to the cause of not going to war with Iran, and that is unfortunate that those are the people who, due to their own sort of opposition to going to war, are really bringing up these points. But we're seeing these narratives sort of percolate to the top of Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, having since 1995 and onward for more than 20 years now claimed that Iran is always a few months away from having a nuclear bomb. And the fact that we're now seeing that kind of, narrative come from these MAGA adjacent right-wing personalities and media through to mainstream media, so much so that CNN really had a main episode sort of highlighting this, I think was interesting to observe. As far as initially, something else that I think a lot of us have seen is that, of course, Iranian life is less valuable than Israeli life. And so we were in the first 3 days getting a lot of accounts of the casualties on the Israeli side, and not really getting accounts on either numbers or narratives of the people who were being killed or injured on the Iranian side. I've observed that that's kind of shifted a little bit now. We're getting a little bit more of that in the media, where they're trying to cover both sides, even though I think still disproportionately attending to casualties on the Israeli side and discounting the value of life on the Iranian side. Overall, I think unfortunately what we're seeing is a completely broken down information landscape, mediascape, not just on the Western side, but also in the Iranian mediascape, right? Which for years, there's been a lot of funding for pro-Israel adjacent voices to push certain narratives of practically joining the woman life freedom movement hand in hand with some kind of pro-Israeli regime change narrative on Iran, of claiming the values and the slogans of woman life freedom for this kind of militaristic, aggressive sort of stance toward Iran. And today we saw Benjamin Netanyahu basically go on air and ask Iranians, in the name of woman life freedom, to come to the streets, discounting the fact that Iranians, as much as they have been opposed to their own government's support to Hamas and Hezbollah, and are perhaps more than other populations in the Middle East inclined to oppose that kind of Palestinian speech, have nevertheless, for close to 2 years now, seen the decimation and annihilation of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And they do come from a humanist tradition and are able to put away that kind of political stance and really take a position against that. And so Iranians, as much as their media information systems have not served them, they've been disproportionately infused by these disinformation systems that have highlighted certain tropes, certain narratives over others, magnified certain leaders over others. Reza Pahlavi, I don't think, within Iran, based on my conversations with people and based on my scanning the social media accounts from within Iran and writings from within, he does not have the kind of traction that he's presented to have abroad, especially among these sort of, sort of right-wing pro-Israel adjacent groups supported. And so all of this, muddies the waters and has disabled any kind of possibility for Iranians to really have a conversation that is based on veracity of information, or of and the Islamic Republic is equally, of course, guilty of this, because they too have shut down any kind of means or channels for people to have open communication with each other within public national channels. Of course, Iranians are having all these conversations in the social media space, which has been infiltrated and unduly affected by nefarious interest groups. I think I will end it there. The incident of bombing the Sada Sima studio was really telling, because the Israeli government said, we will attack the dictator wherever we want. And that's what we did. In the international media, in some quarters, people were, of course, criticizing the fact that Israel is going for a media station that today, for example, it's attacked, that it's going for the same kinds of targets as it has in Gaza, the media, hospitals, emergency rescue operations like the Red Crescent Society, and so on. But within Iran, you couldn't ignore the fact that Iranians who for so long have been fed propaganda through their own media system of Sada Sima certainly found some pleasure in seeing that bombing. So, overall, I think my heart goes out really to Iranians, because they've had a valiant struggle to achieve greater rights from within, to fight that battle on a daily basis to reform their system. They've been denied that by their own government, and now they have a war criminal who is carrying out a genocide elsewhere coming to Iran to rescue Iranians, so to speak. I will end by quoting Nargis Mohammadi, whose statement, along with Jafar Panahi, Shirin Ebadi, and a few others, has been highly criticized for not mentioning the Israeli aggression. But nevertheless, she was in an interview with BBC NewsHour shortly after the release of that statement. And she said, what can we do? We are caught between the supreme leader of this country, Ali Khamenei, who has promised us heaven and taken us to hell, and Benjamin Netanyahu, who is promising us freedom and democracy, but also taking us to hell.
Thank you, Dr. Samdus. And now it's Lior Sternfeld's turn.
Thank you, Mateo. I want to thank you for organizing this event and my co-panelist. I really appreciate hearing you, and I also want to convey my sympathies to everyone affected by this horrible, horrible war. I hate to invoke the following name, but Henry Kissinger said 50 years ago that Israel doesn't have foreign policy, it only has domestic policy. And he was quite right. Everything that Israel is doing aimed to serve political purposes domestically. After 20 months of an ongoing genocide in Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government were locked in a dead end. The war lost its support domestically in the Israeli public. The numbers of the polling numbers of Netanyahu were diving down, and the news of an imminent nuclear agreement between Iran and the U.S., where I think the scariest part for Netanyahu, because it would have taken the topic that pretty much maintained his political career off the table. He knew that an agreement that Trump would sign is not an agreement that Obama signed, and he would not be able to campaign against Trump the way that he campaigned against Obama. And the window of opportunity was closing for him. So I think that this is why Netanyahu chose this timing to launch this attack. We know, I mean, officially the reason was that Iran was minutes from making the bomb, but we know that this is not the reason. There were also reports 2 days ago that Iran was actually 3 years away from the bomb. But it doesn't matter. We saw the total failure of the international community to respond to the war in Gaza, and Netanyahu knew that he probably can rely on this inaction moving forward with Iran for all the reasons that Nahid mentioned and all the others. Another thing that we see in the past week is that Israel, the Israeli media, became a loudspeaker for the Iranian opposition in the diaspora. Every message of Reza Pahlavi, so Naid, you said that it doesn't have traction in Iran, but it does have traction in Israel. Every message, every social media post of Pahlavi, of his wife, get highlighted. Look, the Crown Prince said that he supports the attack. The Shabanu wrote on social media, attack them. And therefore, it's okay. The Israeli media, the message that Israelis get, and I do really I do something like 8 hours a day now of media interviews in Israel and around, and I have to convince them that there are voices other than Los Angeles in the Iranian political discourse, in the Iranian social conversation, because they believe that whatever they get from Los Angeles and from the Iranian diaspora is the authentic Iranian approach to the war. And by the way, I don't know if you all saw, but Masih al-Nijad just took on Twitter against Netanyahu and the ridiculous warnings to the residents of Tehran. So even if you lost Masih al-Nijad, then it means something. But this doesn't get the attention. So there's really an attempt to amplify the voices that support the war, that celebrate the attacks. the Israeli public overwhelmingly believe that they are going to liberate Iran, and that Iran is going to be that the great liberal democracy of the Pahlavis will reign again, and the friendship and peace between the countries will emerge the same way. I have a few more things to say, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, it is 8:40, and I had scheduled 30 minutes of conversation between the panelists, so we can go ahead and get started on that. If anybody in the panel has a question for somebody else, or they want to add to something that they've said, or maybe they want to correct. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Siamis.
I'm just going to say, I think it's pretty funny that none of us mentioned nuclear program or nuclear bombs. I think it's quite telling because, and I see there's also a question from someone asking whether this conflict might be a reflection that of the US and Israel wanting regime change. And I think as much as that has taken up so much media space and so much air in public conversation, none of us who know the situation or have been paying attention to Iran's nuclear program actually, mention it. Perhaps it's because it's not part of our expertise, but nevertheless, it's telling because, as a reporter, I did cover Iran's nuclear program, and indeed, Iran was subjected to the most stringent IAEA inspections. It was a signatory to the NPT, so of course the nuclear justification is just a red herring, it's just a ruse, it's a smokescreen to be able to reshape the Middle East in Israel's image in order to subjugate the countries or make them inferior in power and sovereignty, of course, to Israel, at least, defang them as far as they are perceived as threats. And so, when these questions are raised about whether this is about regime change, 100% this is about regime change, but I think it's more nefarious than that. I think it's really about diminishing Iran and diminishing a country that has long, whether we agree with the Ayatollahs or not, and very few do. Very few Iranians do support the regime, and there are always these numbers and percentages thrown around. But at the end of the day, it is a country that was trying to tread its own independent path outside of the influence and sphere of the sort of Israel-US hegemony. And beyond regime change, I think the goal is to seriously diminish Iran. I'm sorry, this is not a question for my panelists, just noting that none of us really talked about the nuclear program.
Thank you for that.
One of the notes that I made to myself was that actually the first headline that I saw on the Iranian nuclear in the Israeli press was from 1984, that Iran is months away from having a bomb.
Dr. Mohammadpour.
Yes, thank you very much. I was actually going to build up on what Naida just said. I think it's a really important point because we've sidelined it because this is the irony. The irony is this, that Iran is a signatory of the NPT. Iran, as Naid said, has been under the IAEA inspections, and if you've been receiving all kinds of reports, and it's not just a new thing. If you go back to the early 21st century, from the very early episodes of negotiations between them, this was happening at the time of Khatami. So if you look back at the memoirs of Mohammad al-Baradei, and what Jack Straw is telling us is that it was the other party who really stabbed the whole thing in the back and torpedoed the whole process. It was not really the fault of the Iranians, who were still in the whole discussion. So Iran is part of NPT, doesn't have any nuclear weapon, and everybody says tomorrow is going to have a nuclear weapon. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 3 years, 10 years down the line, and it just never happens. But the reality is that Israel is not part of NPT. It does have a stockpile of nuclear weapons, which it hasn't declared, and there is no oversight on it. Israel has not, unlike Iran, the same regime, who has been very oppressive on its own people, has not actually technically, according to the United Nations Charter and the international law, invaded any country. No country. Israel, from the very beginning of it, has been consistently invading neighboring countries. Well, they have attacked it already. They have actually engaged in these wars, and particularly in the past 2 decades. This has happened in Gaza, this has happened in Syria, this has happened in Lebanon, this has happened in Iraq, and this has been consistently going on. So when you look at the so-called pretext of the war, is just non-existent. It's exactly the same pattern that we had in Iraq. That vial just doesn't exist. But the moment you tell them, okay, well, the violence, well, Iran has been talking about eliminating Israel off the face of the earth, which is of course true, which is outrageous, which is ridiculous, which is useless. But everybody should know that whoever has cooked this up, whoever has produced this, is actually not doing anything in action. And at the same time, the country has been going on ahead, but it's used either for internal political debate or as some kind of an ideological trope to sort of play politics. We say tomorrow, if you don't eliminate them, if you don't, as Naid was saying, if you don't defang them, they're going to just bomb Israel and everybody's going to get killed. So here is the reality. Iran did not at all bomb Israel until Israel started it first. Look at the number of assassins, and this is not just in this case. If you look back at the past 2 decades, Israel has been consistently doing that, and with that one, Iran has not been responding in kind. I mean, when you kill all the nuclear scientists, Iran has not been doing it, but we don't have any record of those things. Is that a terrorist act? Of course, it's a terrorist act. If you go back to the history of the U.S. and the CIA, look at the neighboring country. Look at Fidel Castro. How many years has the U.S. operators been trying to eliminate, or that big enemy, the communist guy, Castro, out of there? And they have, and all the record is out now. What do you call that? Isn't that state-sponsored terrorism? But it looks good. It depends who is doing it. So if I'm doing it, it's fine. It's okay. Nobody should really object to it. But if the other guy even thinks about it, even contemplates it, even speculates about it, then you should, as Donald Trump is saying, all gates of hell should be open to them. And I think that is something that the world is seeing. But the most important element that today I think many state actors are failing to see is that the current generation has fundamentally changed, not just inside Iran, but globally. For the first time in the entire history of contemporary political landscape that we've got, those who were protesting against the genocide in Gaza were actually not Muslims. They were not even Iranians. The majority of them were Europeans. Europeans, Canadians, Americans, these are people from inside their own country. It means that there is a deep sense of disillusionment with the way that these politicians are actually guiding or trying to sort of invent the language or create the rhetoric in order to get people on board with that kind of ideology that they've got. And of course, it's about buying time. As Lior was saying, this was helping Netanyahu, whose popularity was dropping rapidly, to buy some more time. You attack Gaza, you continue to do that, then you go to Iran because you know that the next thing which is going to expect you is the International Criminal Court internationally and also inside Israel. You're going to go to the court. You have to buy time. So the state, which is capable of targeted attacks in this vast country to find all of these military leaders, is incapable of finding its own hostages in a tiny space of Gaza and bring them back with all the technology. Are they capable of doing it? Of course they're capable of doing it. But just Netanyahu doesn't want that to happen. And this is something which is deeply hurting the Israeli people as well. There are people who are victims there, victims on both sides. And so we've got state actor who just completely disregards it. You cannot depict, you cannot show that person as a liberator, as an angel who's going to do it. And of course, it's one of the big ironies that we've got at a segment of Iranian society, and as you said, well, the whole world is not Los Angeles, is convinced that, well, this is good. We've got the angel who's going to save everybody. But history tells us from the past 25 years that in all these cases, it has led to failure. Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud. I have a question for Dr. Siamdous, or rather a comment, see what you think of it. Your point about news coverage of the victims and casualty in Iran is well suited. But I think you mentioned something to that effect, and I wanted you to kind of highlight that, if possible, that because of lack of independent journalists, that are not in Iran and Iran does not allow them, Iranians are kind of doing it to themselves, or regime is doing it to itself too, that we don't know exactly what's going on as well. What do you think about that? Because, aside from obviously blaming others, which we should, because they're to be blamed because they're doing it, at the same time, the Iranians are doing that as well.
100%. And, it's the Islamic Republic's media office at Ershad basically started restricting media access incrementally, more and more so after the 2009 Green Uprising. And at the moment, we don't have, Washington Post doesn't have anybody there, New York Times doesn't have anybody there, LA Times doesn't have anybody there. So all these papers have sources and they contact them, but there are no people on the ground who can actually do that, the kind of reporting that would be in favor of, if not the state, certainly the Iranian people, to have their story out there. And this is certainly, for that we can blame the Iranian government itself. But it's not just that, it's also the Iranian government is also playing a game of presenting its side as victorious. And so I have also noticed they're not very keen to highlight, they've posted a few, if you look at the pro-regime sort of accounts, they've posted some photos of of some martyrs, such as the little dancer and the poet and the taekwondo, boy. But for the most part, they are not keen to present Iran as suffering too much devastation and death. And so at the end of the day, I think, my point holds that it is very much the Iranian people that are losing out from both ends of this. And the Western media narrative has always been, disproportionately highlighting the lives of non-Middle Easterners, Israelis, Westerners as more valuable. That is a script we've seen for so long.
Thank you for that. Turaj, I have a question for you. Do you think there are enough resources or enough people that would care about the cultural heritage that is movable for them to be protected if and when, God forbid, it comes to that, if there are massive bombings like we experienced in Baghdad in 2002?
I mean, I'm hoping that, of course, people have this sense of protecting their own, but obviously when there's chaos and of course where there has been economic hardship and so on, things can be taken and can be chopped off, stolen, and so on. And I just mentioned the National Museum, but within Tehran there are more than, I think, 130 some museum, at least 10, 15 years ago. The numbers have grown, of course, of various nature, and just multiply that then by this other cities and so on. So there are lots of places that can be looted and destroyed. So it could be a catastrophe if there is no kind of central authority to pay people to be protecting these places, locking the front doors, and so on. Of course, that is an absolute and clear fear to the cultural heritage of, I think, Iran, but any country that will go through something like this.
Lior, do you think, I mean, this is something that Middle Eastern studies scholars have been debating, I think, for some time now. But do you think all ills or all problems of the Middle East can go away if and when, hopefully when, Israel makes peace with the Palestinians?
This is this question becoming more and more theoretical by the day. But you know what? I personally believed that the framework that showed us the way to a better Middle East was the Arab League Peace Initiative from 2002. Which I keep emphasizing that Iran ratified it 5 times, and Israel never brought it to a discussion. It was never discussed, not even once, in the Israeli cabinet. I think that it would have provided some kind of formula for Israel's ability to exist in the Middle East in a peaceful relation, within the neighbors, but also, let's say, what's being thrown at me every time that I say it is that Iran would have never accepted it. I said, look, Iran always said that they championed the Palestinian cause. Never mind that every Iranian president since Rafsanjani said that if the Palestinians make an agreement that would be acceptable to the Palestinian people, Iran would not carry the banner of the Palestinian struggle. Never mind that, but at least you will not give them the reason to, like, it. They will have to change their rhetoric. They will have to change, Iran would have to change the way that it approaches Israel, or, what kind of argument. The fact that Israel never, and this, it goes back to my point about domestic politics, that Israel doesn't have foreign policy, it has only domestic. And the same way Iran was used in Israel as a way to maintain the occupation, because as long as Iran existed as this threat from the outside, there was always something that could unite the international community behind Israel and kind of turn blind eye to the occupation and the horrors of the occupation. And this was a good arrangement for Israel. And especially since the Abraham Accords were signed, they also saw that much of the Arab world is okay with the occupation as long as they get their benefits. So the gamble succeeded until October 2023. And if somehow, I don't know how we're getting out of this, I will try to watch my language, but if I'm trying to think about what way do we have out of here now, it's only going back to some kind of regional framework. I don't know. I don't know how and if the U.S. can regain any kind of credibility in order to lead it. But maybe it's time to pressure China, which it really pains me to think about China as kind of moral leader in this. But we have to find the superpower that would impose conditions on Israel and all the participants, but to create a new framework for the Middle East.
To follow up with that, I think there is a dishonest actor, dishonest broker in all of this, and I don't think that's the state of Israel. I think that's the United States.
Well, that's
to be honest,
the United States could have. I mean, the United States could have ended the war in Gaza on day one. The United States could have prevented the war in Iran now. The United States could have ended the occupation 50 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, but for some time, the United States was able to use its hegemonic role as, at least to make some kind of, to show some kind of progress. And if we go to the Camp David Accords or the Oslo Accords, or there was always a sense that at least we're getting small steps, but we're getting the right direction. But in the past 10 years, it's completely lost. The sense is completely lost. And again, I thought that the Abraham Accords were actually detrimental to peace in the Middle East.
Thank you for that. Dr. Mohammadpour, if you were Iran, what would you do?
Well,
And you don't have 10 minutes.
very quickly, I think it's a very simple issue. The immediate thing is immediate ceasefire on both sides, because you have to stop the loss of life. This insanity, this senseless violence should come to an end, because it just leads to nowhere. Nothing good comes out of it. It kills people on both sides, whether civilians or non-civilians. So the first thing is that we have to call for a ceasefire. The second one is continuing to have a meaningful negotiation on the nuclear program, and Iran should really work towards a peaceful transition to nuclear energy. And at the end of the day, this is something which could be achieved. And I think there is a path for it. And my sense is that even Trump would have an appetite for that one, and I think there are countries around the globe who could actually collaborate with him. What we really need to move out of the window is this kind of colonial mentality, this kind of imperialistic expansionist idea, which exists on both sides, actually. This is not just Israel behaving like a colonial power, just expanding its role, occupying places, but also Iran, which, as always, we've had certain factions who've been thinking about creating an empire in the world. This is not going to happen. Everybody knows that. Even the Iranian supreme leader is aware of this, and he said it quite recently. There was a signal in what he said, that whatever happens in Israel, we cannot just push people into the sea. And that was an incredible signal, which was saying that I am ready to have a conversation with you. But of course, there are factions inside Iran, there are factions inside Israel who do not want that to happen. This is what Lior mentioned. And I think if I was Iran, these are the two main things that I would do. Immediate ceasefire, because you need to, if you do not lay down arms, no process, no kind of political process would ever start, and it would be a failure. And it would be a failure for the international community. And I think the burden is on Britain, on France, on Canada, and all these European countries, including particularly Germany in this case. This is a very point-on situation. Germany is getting stuck into this one. Because of its prior relationship with Israel and the Jewish people. It's up to them to actually fix the problem rather than allowing it to be perpetuating like this. And of course, there are people in the Muslim world who should intervene. Saudi Arabia could do it, and I think they are willing to do it. They know that the Arab countries will massively suffer. And here again, I'm pointing out that just before the invasion was happening, Iranians were in the process of negotiating and mending their relationship with Saudi Arabia. This was completely unprecedented, which means that they're not going to start a war.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Lior.
I just want to say that you know, musing on Dariush's thoughts here, I say if I were Iran, I'd probably try to pull China into this agreement, into this negotiation. To have a superpower that is Iran's biggest trade partner, that may have more of Iran's interest on their side. I think that this is something that could actually be fruitful in the long term.
Other questions, comments between the panelists before we open it up? I mean, there are so many questions. I want to make this clear again, and don't want to repeat it, but I think it needs to be repeated. I'm looking at the Middle East from a broader perspective, although this is about Israel and Iran, but I think every actor in the Middle East and every state in the Middle East will be dragged into something about Israel because Israel cannot make peace with the Palestinians. So I think it starts with the Palestinian negotiations and a settlement, and it ends there. And also, I think it's very important for people to understand, maybe for 1 second, as much as it might be difficult for some of us to do, to put ourselves in an Israeli situation. What would you do as an Israeli citizen? You know, I keep going back to reading Being Israeli by Shafir, and, you know, taking some of that stuff out. And it's really painful to see that a nation after 80 years of existence cannot come to a conclusion that, you know, it's political actors anyway. They do try, but I still think there is a dishonest broker, and that is the United States. I think if anybody wants to see peace in the Middle East, the United States cannot be eliminated, obviously, but, you know, they should stay in the background. They would be good for a Marshall Plan, and that's about it. You know, they don't make good diplomats, actually, that way. All right, we have about 10 questions, and we've had a persistent ask by an audience to speak. that since we're not opening the mics, if anybody has a question or comment, we'll be happy to read it, and the panelists will take turns in answering if they want. So I'll start with the first one. This may perhaps be more rhetorical, but if Iran surrendered as Trump suggests, what would Netanyahu do then? In quotation, oh no, what emergency do I create in order to stay in power? End of quotation. After the first flush of rising poll numbers is over. What do you think, Lior?
What would be the next manufactured crisis? I half jokingly said yesterday that after Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, I think that Ankara is maybe a destination for
Yeah.
for the Air Force fighters. I don't know. I think that Netanyahu very cleverly created a situation which he wins anyway. If the regime collapses, he won. If Iran surrenders, he won, and he will be recognized
Hero.
as a hero worldwide.
Mm.
So and also his poll numbers are shooting up right now.
Wow.
The opposition hails him in Israel. So he already won the war. He doesn't need another crisis. I mean, for now, maybe in a couple of weeks he will need, but for now he doesn't need another crisis.
My wife listens to Turkish media, and she brought this up a couple of days ago. She's like, do you know that they're actually quite afraid in Turkey that they're next? And I was kind of looking for that on the internet, and I found a couple articles, and I found fascinating, and it's interesting that you kind of mentioned that too.
And look, I mean, Turkey is a NATO member. There are some serious implications to attacking Turkey. And also, I don't know if it's still the case, but until a year ago, the Israeli and the Turkish army trained together, even into the Gaza war. The Turkish and the Israeli
Wow.
army still train together. So the connections between, I mean, Erdogan is obviously not a fan, but the Turkish military is very much dependent on Israeli technology, on Israeli supply. So, well, I think that weirder things happen, but it's something to watch.
Before we go to Dariush, I really don't think being a NATO member really matters anymore, because nothing matters with what the West constructs. They deconstruct and they just renege on their promises. So I wouldn't be surprised if Israel comes up with a story that, Turkey serves as an existential threat to state of Israel. I don't see Americans totally saying, well, no, this is because remember, the American politicians are not too fan of,
No,
the NATO.
but Trump said, as he was hosting Netanyahu, he said, Erdogan is a very good friend of mine. So I think that it was also a signal to Netanyahu that he didn't say Netanyahu is a very good friend of mine, but Erdogan is.
Well, we'll see. Hopefully, we're all wrong. Darius, go ahead.
I think this is a matter of historical reflection, and I think at some point probably Turaj would want to add something here. It's if you look at the history of the Mesopotamia, so to speak, I'm talking about in wider terms. You're talking about ancient cultures, that bed of civilization there, and of course, to some extent, it also extends to the very current location of the state of Israel as well, and Palestine, whichever name you want to give to them, depending on what ideology you've got. But the key point is this, that if you look back at Iran, in this civilization, in this culture, for over 3,000 years, we've been developing sustainable institutions, and it's moved from one generation, from one dynasty to another dynasty, but it has allowed culture, even at the under the harshest conditions, to flourish again. This is the term which is now used, that Iran will rise like a phoenix. It won't come to an end. Iran is not synonymous with this regime or that regime. Iran cannot be destroyed with the foolish behaviors of this dynasty or that dynasty. Iran has gone through a revolution, has put an end to the Pahlavi dynasty. Iran is going through a lot of massive changes with the mullahs, with the Islamists, and the ideology has fundamentally changed. If you look at the past 100 years, this is not like the case of Syria. This is not like the case of Iraq, like Jordan, because all those countries are new. They are born out of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. What happens with Iran is that we've got a culture which has never gone to that point. It's as if there is some kind of an instinct in people that they immediately recognize that any path of destruction should not be taken. We need to take a step back. We need to wait. And this has happened repeatedly after the Iranian Revolution. It seems that people immediately learned the lesson to find a way to get out of it. The election of Muhammad Khatami was one sign of it, that they moved away from the Islamist ideology. What happened in the Green Movement was another one. And in the Mahsa movement, again, we had the same signal. It's not just that the regime was repressive. It's that people, there was something, you cannot put your finger on it. You cannot immediately show data on it. It's as if they thought that this is not going to lead to civilization. It's a message of death. You have to go back. You have to take a step back and gradually, slowly go under the skin of these patriarchal, I don't know, outdated, despotic, whatever name you want to give to it, to slowly and gradually change it and bring development to it. This cannot be brought by foreign intervention. It's that simple. Even in other countries, even in countries that do not have that kind of a civilizational background in that sense, I mean, in contemporary times, it hasn't worked. Why would it work in Iran? I think there's a point where sane people, the adults in the room, in the national community, should say, you know what, enough is enough. This is not going to work. You're going to get everybody killed.
Thank you for that. Let me read the next question. Would it be fair to assume that Israel is a threat to every other country in the Middle East due to her possession of nuclear weapons? Go ahead, Knight.
I just want to bring up Professor Avi Schleim of Oxford University, because there's been a clip that's been going viral of him actually speaking to this point in response to the Israeli, I believe, I want to say foreign minister at one point about 5-6 years ago. And Lior, maybe you've seen this clip and you know who I'm talking about. But in it, you know, this is, I think, at the Oxford Union or some debating place, and he says that in fact he makes this point that, you know, if anything, Israel has been the irresponsible actors, most certainly in, you know, over the last couple of years. We've seen, you know, since the Gaza war, we've seen this, but even before that, you know, Israel as the one that has nuclear weapons, as the only country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons, you know, one would think that we would view Israel as a threat rather than, and with the wars that it's waged in the region, rather than the other way around. But Israel's president, I'm forgetting his what's his name?
Herzl?
Herzl, sorry, it's late. I'm so tired. I've just been a few sleepless nights. You know, today said, we need to eliminate the big evil of Iran, something like that, verbatim, not verbatim, but, you know, we need to eliminate this big evil empire, the big evil empire. And, you know, these are sound bites that we find ridiculous, but that clearly have traction with people. But I will also say, in observing media and observing sort of you know, media responses and audience responses, both on social media as well as under sort of interviews on YouTube and here and there, that that kind of talk has less and less, you know, the bag is kind of out of the bag, right? The cat is out of the bag. That kind of talk doesn't have as much traction anymore. But the problem is that it almost doesn't matter. I mean, there were millions and millions and millions of people who came out onto the streets, you know, at the beginning, before the invasion of Iraq in 2003. But that didn't prevent the US from attacking Iraq and enforcing regime change. So unfortunately, you know, it is a bit of a desperate moment because we're seeing the replay of all of this. We've seen this movie before. People's perceptions have actually changed. They're seeing this too, to a much greater extent, I think, than you know, leading into the Iraq War. And yet we have also become, our governments have become much more authoritarian in the West. And so, you know, people's opinions and contentions and positions on these issues matter less and less because our own governments have become more authoritarian and less lenient toward their own populations. And so overall, you know, it's very difficult currently to stay out of a sort of a doom and gloom sort of mindset.
Thank you for that. I'm skipping some of the questions because I think they were kind of responded to or addressed in the panelist discussion. Somebody's thanking the panel, but also asking, could you comment on the position of the Mujahids? We're talking about the MEK, Mujahideen al-Khalq. Do they have any traction? I haven't seen or read much about them while there's so much about the Pahlavis. Go ahead, Darsh.
That's actually a very, very good question. It's a very clever question, and I think everybody should really pay attention. This is a huge problem because the Mujahideen al-Khalq has been active. It's been organized for many centuries.
You want to give the introduction as to who they are because some people might not know.
Mujahideen al-Khalq were born out of previously. It was born out of the leftist movement, and then they became they adopted some kind of an Islamist and ideology, but they've got an Islamist socialist ideology, but they separated from the very beginning of the revolution from the rest of the regime. They invaded Iran once, pretty much the same style that we've got today, and the mentality which is created now, that during the Iran-Iraq war, these people found refuge in Iraq, and then they invaded Iran to have a coup d'etat and gain power, and they failed. And of course, they've been living in different camps in Iraq and Albania. But here's the point. They're organized. They're very much organized, and they've got influence, and everybody thinks that they are dead. But here's the problem. There are two scenarios here. One of them is that, particularly after the Green Movement, some factions inside the Iranian state tried to revive the Mujahideen al-Khalq as some kind of a boogeyman, which Mir Hossein Mousavi referred to, that they're making it too big, but they did have influence, and they could derail many of the civil demonstrations. I mean, you've got a group of people who are silently demonstrating, and you've got somebody who's blowing something up. And of course, the state is going to crack down upon them. And then it's, oh, it was the Green Movement who did it. Everybody knows it wasn't the Green Movement. You could actually play with them. And this had happened on a number of occasions. So is the network of Mujahideen al-Khalq right now active in Iran? I think they are really working closely with whatever is happening, whether you've got all the spies or the sleeper cells of the Israeli intelligence inside Iran who's blowing things up everywhere using their drones, etc. I think it's a strong possibility that we have got remnants of the sympathizers of Mujahideen al-Khalq, or those who are controlled by them, that they are making some changes. So we shouldn't take it out of the account. That, because if you look at the Pahlavist sympathizers on the social media and the Mujahideen al-Khalq, these are the two main figures who have contributed significantly to the manipulation, to the propaganda which is happening on the social media, and which has such a massive impact on the mentality of the people of Iran, because that kind of zombie-like behavior, that you do not look for the context in which you could actually develop a sustainable political solution to the problem, and everybody wants to put an end to them, just kill them, is something which comes from both camps of the Pahlavis and the Mujahideen al-Khalq, because they want to put an end to the mullahs. Anything other than that one is unacceptable. None of these things are really in the prospect of civil society, so to speak. So on this side, they are on the opposite side of civil society, and they are, I think, but we don't have figures. This is the problem, that right now it's very difficult to have a a systematic study, sociological study, political study of how they're doing it, because it's under the radar of intelligence apparatus. I'm sure both the Iranian intelligence apparatus and the Israeli intelligence apparatus has got detailed information of how they're operating, but we don't know that. I mean, the public, the intellectuals don't know. If you go back to, for example, what Erwan Abrahamian wrote on the leftist movement, there's a lot of data there. It gives you insight into their structures, into their operations, of how they've led to this thing. But right now, we've got some kind of a vacuum that we don't know, but they are there. We should take this into account. We should remember that it exists.
Thank you for that. A colleague here at Northeastern is asking, Dr. Daryeh and others are getting at the cultural extermination that seems to be at work here, as has been in the destruction of libraries and universities in Gaza. Does this strategy relate to the interstate relations? Israel doesn't seem to want to share the Middle East with any of its neighbors. Can he and the panelists speak to this further?
Let me say something. I mean, we know that just recently a building was hit that partly had a library. So libraries have been hit. So they seem to be under the guise of, having sensitive information in the building. The entire building gets hit, and so the libraries go. I don't think right now Israel is maliciously thinking of hitting historical sites. I think they have the sensibility that would arouse this further nationalist tendencies. I think Dariush talked about some of this idea of this Iranian civilization being old, and whether you like the Islamic Republic of Iran as a regime or not, when it comes to its monuments, both sides use it, the opponents of the Islamic Republic and those who support it. So I think any damage to that, it would be really, I think, counter to Israeli aims in terms of their, what they profess. They're trying to bring democracy and freedom to the Middle East. But I don't think anything is being directly aimed to be destroyed. It's the collateral damage. It's what's terrifying is what may happen if the system collapses.
Lior, do you agree with that? Because we're seeing something totally different and a lot more drastic and horrifying in Gaza.
Yeah, I appreciate the credit that Turaj gives the Israeli directives here. I would be very surprised if it's been any part of the conversation or the instructions or the directives, when they choose targets. I want, like, you actually made me somewhat hopeful that it is, but I don't know.
Okay. We have a student who's written a long comment, but the gist of it is that this panel hasn't been balanced, and they've mentioned Dr. Mohammed Pour's comments, because we haven't provided an Israeli side to the story. Anybody wants to comment? I have something to say, but
Can I add something very quickly? Well, of course, the Israeli side of the story, the way I look at it, let's just remember this. Don't forget about this. When the scholars are talking about a political situation, the scholars are not meant to be loudspeakers of governments. I don't speak for the Israeli government. I don't speak for the Iranian government. I don't speak for the Pahlavi dynasty. I don't speak for the Qajar dynasty. I speak for Iranian people, for the agency of individuals. As far as I'm concerned, for me, the death of an Iranian citizen is no less than or no more than the death of an Israeli citizen, an Arab or a Jewish person. They are all human beings. If one person gets killed, it's as if the entire humanity gets killed. So that is the position, and that is a balanced position. I'm not there to promote the ideology of the mullahs or the Iranian regime or the Israeli one. That is a completely different matter. That is what politicians should be doing. And of course, I can give you narratives. I'm writing a piece on how this whole thing, the hegemonic approach of of the Israelis in the contemporary time. But I think it's coming to a decline. That is what Netanyahu is doing to Israel, because there are many people inside Israel, there are many Jewish voices who are saying that this is becoming detrimental. This is becoming a death sentence for all of us. And this is not what they want, because at the end of the day, do not forget that Jewish people, wherever they live in the world, they are also human beings, and they are meant to live. They cannot live on Mars. They cannot eliminate every other species to just exist everywhere and just be the masters of the entire creation. This is just a joke. You may want to do that, but it would never happen. There would be resistance, not just from the people in the Middle East, not just from Muslims, from Christians, from Jews, from Arabs, from people in Latin America, from people in Europe. And the waves are coming through. You cannot just fool humanity. The Iranian regime can't do it. The Israeli regime can't do it. All they could, it's just like playing against the rules of gravity, against the rules of the world. You might get away with it for sometimes, but you're at the cost of destruction of humanity. Do we want to be there? So my balance is the balance of humanity. My balance is not the balance of this regime or that regime. Now, if the Iranians do it, it's condemned. If the Israelis are doing it, it is condemned. I stand on the side of humanity, on the side of a specific and rigorous observance of the international human law that everybody should equally adhere to. That's my issue. That means Israel, that means Iran, that means Germany. I mean, what the German foreign minister said was outrageous. The way that he was talking about the attacks of the Israelis, it's as if the guy doesn't know anything about the law, about international relations. This is unbelievable. We're not talking about just Iran. We're not talking about all people in Iran. There are all kinds of stupid things which are going around. But at the bottom of at the end of the day, we need to have a kind of adherence and commitment to a set of rules and laws in order to move forward. That's why I think we need ceasefire. That's why we need negotiations.
Thank you for that, Nigel.
Yeah, I'm eager to get to some of the audience questions, but I just want to sort of push back against Dariush and ask Lior if indeed it is, because the sense I'm getting from the media, from Israeli media, is that no, like this is the war that has now completely, and you also referred to this and how you introduced it, because Dariush was just saying that you know, the Israelis, they're also seeing this, that this is harming them. But it seems to me that they have been fed such a complete diet of, you know, Iran being an evil empire that is pursuing them with nuclear weapons, that they are now, I mean, I hear so many very reasonable sounding Israelis who are completely behind this war on Iran, including leftist, you know, journalists and others that I've been following. So I'm actually, just wondering what you're seeing.
I tried to touch upon it in my previous comments, but the war in Gaza, I agree with Dariush that the war in Gaza became very unpopular, and huge sects of the Israeli public decided that enough is enough. They were against, I mean, for various reasons. The war, there was 2 weeks ago, I think 62% of the Israeli public was against the war in Gaza, which is the highest that it was since October 7th. And the war in Iran is actually very popular. As I said, the opposition, pretty much all the heads of the opposition, with the exception of the Communist Party, congratulated Netanyahu on the successful attack. And they, as you said, I mean, it's the building Iran as this existential threat was a project of prime ministers before Netanyahu. It was Netanyahu was often attacked from the left of being unable to eliminate the Iranian threat in the past, before, like when Obama signed the JCPOA, Netanyahu was blamed for not being able to stop it. Again, he was attacked from left-wing or center-left parties for being too weak. So I think that when it comes to analyzing the Israel discourse, The war in Gaza was very unpopular, but now nobody's talking about it. Iran was very popular and took all the attention from the Israeli public and also internationally, and still nobody's talking about Gaza now. So, as I said, this was the perfect way out for Netanyahu from this situation, from this failure, and this is how he's going to win the next elections.
I'm just
Sorry, not to
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
sorry, not to take up too much airtime, but just a quick question. And then, I'm seeing everybody sort of on the Israeli side say we don't target, Israel doesn't target civilian, attacks civilian targets. They do, we don't. Where is this cognitive dissonance coming from, where they've seen for 2 years a civilian population targeted en masse, and then still holding on to this belief that Israel doesn't attack civilians?
Nahid, I think I don't remember if you and I had this conversation, but the Israeli public is not aware of what's going on in Gaza. The Israeli television doesn't show images from Gaza. And if Israelis don't actively look up or their social media feeds bring it to them, they don't get any idea of what's going on in Gaza. And they don't care. They don't care. They certainly don't care enough to go. Al Jazeera is blocked in Israel. You have to use VPN in order to go on Al Jazeera.
No free press?
Al Jazeera is blocked by law in Israel. You have to use VPN. And I mean, in my circles, many people use VPN to read Al Jazeera, but most Israelis don't. And also, Israelis highly dependent on Hebrew outlets because many of them don't speak any other languages, don't read in any other languages. And when the Hebrew media basically decides en masse not to bring the images from Gaza and not to bring images from Iran, then Israelis have to digest what they get. And I'll say that there are two media outlets in Israel that really made it part of their journalistic mission to bring images from Gaza, to bring stories from Gaza, to bring voices from Gaza, and also now from Iran. And this is Haaretz and Local Call, which is the Hebrew partner of 972 magazine. These are the only media news outlets but also we can't, I mean, their rating is so small and insignificant. And, we can fit the entire Israeli left in this room. And these are the people that read the Haaretz, and these are the people that read Local Call. This is part of this dissonance. Israelis believe that there's no hunger in Gaza because they don't see it. They believe that Israel targeted only Hamas militants because this is what they get. They believe that Israel has been using surgical precision in the attacks in Iran because this is what they are being told. And there's no one to dispute it.
Wow.
Uh,
Dr. Mohammed.
Lior, thank you very much. This is a brilliant way of just filling in the gaps. So I'm going to add another layer to that one because this point about media is really, really significant because what we have today is an incessant propaganda war, psychological warfare on both sides. Don't forget about this. On the side of Israel, and Israel has got its apparatus. Iran International, the expat opposition media is really in the hands of the Israelis, and they're selling exactly the narrative that Israel is selling those same people inside Israel, because the Israeli government being the good guy and Iranians being the barbarians and the bad guys is just a typical image that they've sold to some Iranians as a result of their frustration with the regime and the 4 decades of unanswered demands that they've got, and they buy it very simply. Where does it come from? It's because they do not give you the whole truth. That's the issue. Iran does that, Israel does that, but of course, the world is not just the Iranian regime and the Israeli regime. The social media is there. I mean, people find their own narratives. It depends how tightly you control it. Right now, today, one of the common tropes that the opposition has is that, okay, they are now blocking the internet, so nobody will find out. Well, that is happening in Israel a lot, in a much greater way of doing it. Why? Why do you need that? Because you need to keep that image of the psychological calmness of your own people in order to continue the warfare. You would lose it. And of course, they would make that decision. So if the Israelis say you're not allowed to film this place, you're not allowed to give news coverage of this place, that is good. But if the Iranians do it, it's bad. But the reality is that the Iranians can't do anything about it. Everybody is doing it, including Israeli spies inside Iran, including those Iranians who have actually sold their mentality to the propaganda operators of Israel, and it just works there. So there's a disparity here, but the key point is that blocking the media, not allowing free press to operate, is not something which is just the fault or the crime of the Iranian regime because of many other issues. It also exists in Israel, and I think Lior demonstrated that perfectly in how that situation has continued. I want to add one point, which is really, again, it's coming deeply from my humanist way of looking at the world. I am deeply convinced that it's not just the Iranian people and the Israeli people and the Jewish people. Once you expose them to the truth, once you give them empathy, there are people, not just the left in Israel. They are human beings. Let's not forget it. Israelis, Jewish people are not different kinds of different species. They're not coming from Mars like other people. Remember that if you really touch the humanity, the shared humanity of these people, there would be a way out of it. But this is going beyond just politics. Sometimes it sounds to be a very poetic way of looking at it, but I can elaborate on that one if there's time. But I think that's an important point, that we need to really touch on the humanity of people. We need to bring out empathy. I mean, one of the major issues we've got right now inside Iran, particularly in the mentality of the expat, is that they've completely lost their sense of empathy. For 20 years, the Iranian people, many Iranian people, have been so traumatized mentally, intellectually, psychologically. I mean, that kind of, I'm sorry, I apologize for our cat, that now many people don't think. What they want, we just want the Iranian regime gone. And that trauma is taking one thing away from them, empathy. The empathy is completely taken away from them. They forget what is happening to other people. And do not forget, when we're talking about Iran, there are people who believe in Khamenei, all right? And all of them are not barbarians. They're not, I don't know, suicide killers, all of them. There are some people who are decent human beings, but yeah, they've got that stupid ideology. Sometimes they hurt other people. But we've got the same narrative there. Sorry.
For the sake of time, I think Dr. Dahier wants to make a response.
I should just say not to counter any of these narratives, but here and there you might get something that is new. I just sent Lior on Facebook an article by Haaretz on actually what is happening to the Iranian people, which has actually the picture of a child being held by a mother, which is bloody. So the narrative may be changing. If this is the case, I don't know if it's right or not. A colleague of mine sent this, that even now people are beginning to see that what is happening in Iran. Do you see the link I sent you from Haaretz?
Yeah. As I said, the Haaretz is one of the two outlets that has been really good about bringing the voices of from Gaza and from Iran now. Haaretz has tried. I'm going to have a conversation with the editors and reporters of Haaretz next week to give them, my analysis of the situation. So they really reach out to people to educate them and to develop their sensitivities. So Haaretz is good. Please go read the Haaretz, subscribe, support. It's the world needs it.
Lior, somebody is asking a very good question. Are Israeli soldiers returning from the front relating information to friends, family that is not available through the Israeli press?
Yes. Yes. Actually, there was a report in Haaretz a few weeks ago that there is a huge number of soldiers experiencing PTSD now. because of what they saw and what they did in Gaza. They report it. There's some of them, you know, it has to be processed in multiple layers, because there's layer of shame, there's layer of being proud, there are many ways to understand it, but they do. And there's also denial, you know, some kind of psychological mechanism of denial, of believing. And again, Haaretz broke number of stories of testimonies of soldiers that came from Gaza and reported back, but it's still it can't be. It's not part of the Israeli conversation. This is not something that you know. If you take all the soldiers that served in Gaza, we're talking about few thousand soldiers, right? Israel is a state of 10 million people. The people who are exposed to the stories or to what's going on in Gaza is very small. So it's important to have those kinds of stories heard, those kinds of stories processed, but right now it's not being done in the public sphere.
Thank you for that. Somebody has written, has anyone trusted the death toll provided by Iranian media inside Iran? Dr. Siamdous mentioned that there is an attempt on the part of Islamic Republic to not disclose too much, and I agree with that, but the numbers mentioned by Mehr or Fars are much more than what we see in the Western media. The last numbers I have seen, and I know one should take this information with a grain of salt, is 585 people killed and 1326 injured. This means that the death toll has doubled since 2 days ago. Would you like to comment, Dr. Siamdous?
Sure. Yeah, I think, again, I think unfortunately, a lot of pages are being taken out of the Gaza playbook. And so what we're hearing in the Western media, oftentimes by Western commentators, is that the numbers that are coming out, even from Iranian news sources, need to be taken with a grain of salt. Because they are reported by Iranian sources. This is like adding the Gaza Health Ministry next to any death toll given from Gaza, and simply not believing in the veracity of that information. And on the other hand, the Islamic Republic itself, and they are trying to downplay the level of damage and death. So I think what Fars and Mehr news agencies report are potentially still below the level of what is in of the casualties. That's how I would go by that number.
Can I add something very quickly here? Noah's perspective is fabulous, but there's one thing that we need to take into account, and that's the reality, it's the facts on the ground. When a war is happening, I mean, you haven't already trained a group of people to go and count the people who are dead or wounded. It's just not humanly possible. It's not possible in Iran. It's not possible in Israel. It's not possible in Gaza. But there are ways of estimating it. But that estimation cannot be, I mean, it's influenced by the ideology, it's influenced by the propaganda, by the media choices they make. But we have to remember that there are restrictions, there are real restrictions, methodologically problematic ways of looking at just getting an estimate of these things. So we need to bear that in mind as well.
Somebody's asking who is the Israeli Jew on the panel. I guess you can say by the last names, but the person who is, they can out themselves, I guess, if they want to.
This is me.
There you go. We got a winner. Very good. I don't know if that makes a difference, but it was a question that I asked. That was asked. One other question, Dr. Siamdous, could you comment on whether or not you are picking up on any trends on cultural productions, music, graphic art, etc., similar to what we had during Zanzar Diyazad?
Thank you, Dr. Yaghoubi, for that question. It's all so new, and most people are in a state of either fleeing their homes or trying to get to safe spaces. And so what I've seen is recirculations of Shervin Hajipour's Beraqs Baman, which is a really beautiful sort of 1 minute, very short rendition of a song where he talks about looking at the missiles and imagining that they're stars and pretending not to be in the Middle East and pretending that they're not just an excuse for weapons manufacturers to make more money, and asking his partner to just focus on him. So I've seen a lot of sort of recirculation of that. And then other sort of more spontaneous, this is something we saw post assassination of Soleimani, when the underground music scene had been deeply repressed and securitized. What you saw were a lot of sort of impromptu musical performances in the streets, such as somebody playing the violin somewhere and then that being taped and recirculated on social media. But in terms of a real sort of artistic or musical response, I'm seeing social media accounts from outside of Iran producing certain music in conjunction with painting and dances, but nothing that I can see too formulated from within Iran. I mean, let's not forget that this war really just started on Friday.
And I think we have one more question. The dehumanizing and distorted education related to Palestinian people in history that Israelis may receive in academic institutions has been well documented. Are there any particularities of propaganda that Israeli students may absorb related to Iran and Iranians in their schools?
I guess that this question is directed at me. Let me say to the defense of the Israeli academia, I got my first encounter with Palestinian history as an undergraduate student in Israel. When I went through elementary school and high school, we got nothing of that could suggest the Palestinian Nakba, that could suggest negative aspects of even how Zionist history affected negatively on Palestinians. There was none of it. When I went as a very naive 23-year-old to Ben-Gurion University to study Middle East studies, this was the first time that I got a Palestinian narrative of the Nakba, of modern history, and I think that this is, until today, this is the only learning environment in which the average Israeli gets to see, to read, and to discuss aspects that are not from within the Zionist understanding of history. About Iran, Iran is a very sensitive topic in the Israeli academia. There were Iranian studies was actually one of the more developed fields in Israel, especially the generation that was still able to go and study in Iran, and then in the 1990s there was some kind of generational shift, but I'll say that overall, the field of Iranian studies remained pretty vibrant in Israel, both in terms of contemporary modern Iranian history, Iranian studies, and also ancient Iran. And I think that Turaj can say maybe something about it. There was always, at least in the Israeli academia in the field of Iranian studies, there was always this understanding that Iran, while the Middle East studies that concentrate on the Arab world was born out of this rivalry, animosity, Iranian studies was born in a different context. And there was this hope that Iranian studies can become some kind of bridge to really understand the culture of Iran. Of course, we have to also remember that maybe like 150 students a year study study Iran. So it's not maybe it makes a dent in the public understanding of Iran, but again, the departments of Middle East studies in Israel maybe the only place in Israel that Israelis can really read and discuss and understand the cultures of the Middle East, of the Palestinians and Iran.
Thank you for that. I don't think we have any more questions or comments. I think some of the questions were asking the same thing, so that's why it seems to be a little quicker than I thought. Would anyone like to make last comments before we close it for the night?
May I add one more point? This is built on what I said. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I see. This is built on what I said about humanism, really, because the way I look at it, not just from the political perspective, but also from the sociological perspective, from the cultural perspective, and I'm looking at our planet, really. Seriously, this is not just an issue of the Middle East. This is not just an issue of the Palestinian people. It's a much broader issue. We might imagine that in the tiny space of Gaza or Israel or in a vast space of Iran, some people are just doing stupid things. It's not going to go away. It's going to have massive, serious repercussions for the future generations. This is not about me and you. This is not about our compatriots alone. This is about our children. This is about our grandchildren. This is about the many generations that are going to come. What war does, not just in the case of Iran and Israel, but what happens in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and all these regions that the war is just raging, is destroying the environment. When you're destroying the infrastructures, which is what right now Israel is doing. I mean that could be a definition of war crime in itself. And but Yoav Gallant was saying when they were saying we're going to cut off the electricity of Gaza, is not just a matter of war crime. It has repercussions for the future of humanity. It has repercussions for our commitment to the planet. You might say that, okay, you're going to get away with it. You're not going to get away with it. You will die today, but your children are going to suffer. Your grandchildren are going to suffer. It's not about me, you, Khamenei, or Netanyahu. People who are going to be in our future will be there. So I think it's the responsibility of every single living, breathing humanity who's got an ounce of decency and empathy to think about it, to put an end to this. This senseless violence must stop.
Thank you for that. Let me thank all the panelists for making yourselves available on such short notice. I appreciate everyone's cooperation, and I'd like to thank Mary Serio as well, our program assistant here at Northeastern. Thank you, Dr. Mohammadpour, Dr. Sternfeld, Dr. Daryei, and Dr. Siamdous, and all the audience with their wonderful questions. Hopefully, we'll meet in under better circumstances and peaceful conditions sometime soon. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Thank you all very much.